for this. I'm just going to walk through it. Feel free to ask questions as we go. It's only about nine or 10 slides, so hopefully of actual material. So hopefully it's not too boring. Just a frame of reference. Proposed work we're talking about is in the downtown public parking lot area, where the existing elevation ranges from about 6.9 to 8.5 in elevation in AVD 88. Proposed parking lot is has a low point at the catch basin of 8.7, and then the high point out at the corner of 10.2. And so the fill depths range from 1 foot to 2.3 feet, but that 2.3 feet is not along the face of the wall. That's a lower, it's more like 1.5 feet along the edge of the wall. Just for a little more context, in cross section, this is where we're talking about. So that 2.3 feet is kind of in the middle of the parking lot, set back about 50 feet from the wall. The greatest depth of fill is set back about 50 feet from the face of the wall. And then just because I want to try to limit the amount of confusion that we have with terminology, I'm just going to kind of go back to a definition of storm surge that I am familiar with, and we can make sure that we're just talking about the same thing. So the surge itself is that increase in water level due to basically due to the storm itself over whatever the tide would be. It's just like the highlighted part here is that storm surge or storm tide don't actually include wave action coming in on top of the surge, and the surge itself is really a function of the characteristics of the storm, its speed and size, and the angle that it approaches the coast, and then the shape and characteristics of the coastline. But those things are really at kind of the larger scale. So whether there is a sound or a bay or large rivers, barrier islands, and whether the coast is kind of rounded out into the sea or concave back in. And so when we talk about the surge is really that 5 feet or so that you see above the mean high water level for a 100-year design storm. That is really the result of the storm itself, and not so much dependent on kind of something the scale of the parking lot itself. And so kind of what we're looking at, the existing FEMA map is familiar to everybody here, I'm sure. But the way that it's mapped is the number is cut off, but there's a transect location here. And I didn't create this map, but generally speaking, what they do is take the information from the closest transect and then apply that to the areas kind of on either side of it. And so this transect here, while it's close to the parking lot, it's not actually at the parking lot. And so what you're seeing, the kind of the FEMA map is not so much, doesn't really take into account specifically what the parking lot elevation is. But just for reference on this zone out here in the harbor and moving through into the cove is the V13 zone. And then, so that's meaning wave heights of 3 feet or more. And then this black line with the triangles is the limit of moderate wave action. And so waves there are less than 3 feet in the AE zone. And so what we did is basically what we're trying to ascertain is what the impact would be in this area from raising, or at least my understanding of what the concern is that we're want to understand what the impact would be of raising the parking lot during a storm event, and how that not necessarily impacting the like height of the surge that's a result of the larger storm and the broader context of the coastline, but more about how water coming up into the cove, kind of in the form of waves, would impact other areas, which is kind of what I think the impact of this would be limited to. And so there aren't really standard methods for kind of looking at this exact problem or this exact question or unknown. And we don't have the raw data from FEMA that they used to create the flood insurance study or the ransom study. What we do have is the information that's published in the flood insurance study, and so we have the still water elevation, and that's about it for this specific location. They did not publish the wave height out here for this transect. And so we made an assumption for the wave height, and it's essentially drew a line across here and propagated the waves into the harbor, kind of at the parking lot area, to see what the difference between the existing condition and the proposed condition would be, kind of from a circulation and reflecting wave energy perspective. And I just have a footnote here that kind of, like I said, the methodology to answer this exact question is kind of is not very often used, or there are methodologies that answer kind of adjacent questions, but not necessarily this one exactly. So we chose HEC-RAS 2D for this because it is a kind of 2D model, so we can see in space what's happening. We can also see, and we can apply a pretty fine resolution to it. So the FEMA transect analysis doesn't really take into account anything. It's only a one-dimensional analysis. It only really applies to exactly where the line is drawn. And then the AdCirc model that Ransom created, I do not believe had the sort of resolution in the harbor area that we would kind of be looking for to answer this question. So that's why we chose this tool. So I just have like a very brief animation of what we're talking about. So for the purposes of this, we're using from the flood insurance study a 100-year still water elevation of 8.8, which is about 4.5 feet of surge over the mean high water. And then based on how far kind of up or into the harbor, we are a 3-foot wave with a 5-second period. And so you can kind of see what this model shows us is how, in this case, purple is the wave crest, so the top of the wave, and green is the lower water surface elevation. So you can kind of see how the wave energy is dissipated and reflected throughout this kind of immediate area. So we did that for the existing condition, and then essentially raised the entire parking lot elevation to 10, and then did the same thing. And from that, we created basically, so for each simulation, there was a maximum water surface elevation kind of throughout this area. And then we compared the existing to the proposed basically by taking that maximum water surface elevation everywhere for the proposed condition and subtracting the existing condition. And so what you see is that there is a pretty small change in that maximum water surface elevation. The greatest change is about 4 inches, and in some cases it's actually a little bit less, but I would kind of caution against using these numbers exactly. It's really more about kind of the order of magnitude of changes, and that increase is really confined to the kind of immediate boat ramp area where a little bit of wave energy gets kind of concentrated there. But again, we're not talking about a very large increase. And just for context also, I have the FEMA flood zones on this figure, with the purple being the VE13 zone and the blue being the A10 zone. And then the change in the maximum water surface elevation between the existing and the proposed, ranging from about -0.1 to positive 0.3. And so kind of like using those results in combination with some observations, at least the photos that we've seen that have been shared with us of the recent storms in December of 2022 and January of 2024, is that the wave height in the harbor is really quite low, and generally less than 3 feet. So that corroborates what we used as a kind of a test wave height. And raising the parking lot is not going to impact kind of the magnitude of the storm and the level of surge that the harbor is experiencing. But what it will kind of do is change the way any energy coming into the harbor is circulated or reflected, or is kind of coming back off of a vertical wall. And so what we found is that raising the parking lot will likely change the wave patterns in the immediate vicinity of the seawall, but based on these model results, it's likely to be a pretty small change, limited to along the face of the wall. And basically that kind of regardless of the findings of this this analysis, that the east end of the wall, like the best practice certainly is for there to be a transition from the end of the wall with riprap armoring to provide stability, but also some energy dissipation. What we're looking at are very low wave energy scenarios, but just to provide additional stability there. And that is actually the last slide that I have any content on. So I just wanted to field any questions at this point, or just open it up for discussion.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So yeah, folks, questions.
What does the riprap armoring look like, and what sort of scale does it? I mean, there's not a whole lot of space available there. What are you thinking?
Right, so that would be, excuse me, kind of in, and I think this might be an older figure, but that would be in this area here where there is kind of or at least up until recently, it looked like there had been, when I was there last Wednesday, some material filled in there, but where there has been some erosion historically. So it would be in this area, kind of as the wall will have to end, and kind of overlapping with the last X feet of wall, whether it's 10 or 15 feet of wall, there will have to be riprap behind it and kind of wrapping around to match into the existing grade along the property line. So no, there is not a whole lot of space there, but it will, I haven't done the design to size the riprap yet, but it's something pretty reasonably large, I would think, in the kind of 12 to 18-inch range. But again, I haven't done the design, so I wouldn't.
And that's
Wouldn't
being
go out and
placed
put it-
behind the walls, so it won't interfere with the exterior and access points for boats, which I think was the concern. Am I correct?
So the first part, yes, it would be behind and kind of
Yeah.
up to the end of the wall, not on the face of the wall,
Right.
and certainly not on the face of the wall out here.
Thank
So
you.
I don't think that, I don't see it being interfering with boat access along the wall in its current configuration.
So if somebody asked us the question about what would it do for the properties beside it, you're saying it's gonna be a minimal impact and that only place that there's really gonna be a surge is on the ramp. Big
That's what
surge.
this, yeah, that's what this model is telling us.
So the Tidewater Motel immediately abuts the ramp, and I know they're concerned. So I'm hoping you're saying this with a fair amount of confidence.
I mean, based on the results of this analysis, which is as far as I can tell, the best way to represent this, then yes, that's the degree of confidence that I have there. Really what it's showing is that there's a little bit of kind of concentration of some wave energy right in this area where it's going up the boat ramp, and like there in the existing condition, there's just a little bit more room for it to go kind of spill out around the end of the boat ramp, and in the proposed condition, the wave will run up a little bit higher along the wall. We're not seeing significant changes at the Tidewater location.
Super. And the same for the property to the right on the screen, the Weiss and Walsh, because they had a fair amount of damage on their frontage during the January storm. And I don't know whether that is the town going to do something there, or is that their responsibility to armor that wall?
Are you
Town-
talking, are you talking about Dot and Millie's, Lynell?
Yes, yes.
I think I can answer some of that.
Super, thank you.
Yep, that right up to Dot and Millie's is actually owned by the town.
Mhm.
And so the repair at the time was riprap in there to just sort of reinforce that retaining area. In the plans, we are building a wall that goes from the corner of the parking lot over to the building and just past, correct me if I'm wrong, just past the front dining room.
Mhm.
And that wall is what you see right now where his mouse is.
Yep. Yep.
And so that should help protect the front of that building as well as the land next to it, as far as.
Thank you. Thank you. Very helpful, Millie.
Well, now I know they had a concern that the wall, kind of ends at their property and,
Right.
but it's also not, I mean, that's private property. So if they want the wall to extend across their property, and then if
It's their
Victoria
responsibility.
Olson wants the wall to extend all the way to her, the end of her property, they would need to pay for that. That's
That's
not,
what I suspected, but I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
and I mean, I haven't said that to them because we haven't really discussed that, option, but when Brent was out, I mean, he's basically saying that's like $100,000 project, so.
Ouch.
I think it can be proposed to them, but it's doubtful that they would want to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's worth discussing with them. Cause I mean, the town is not gonna do that, so that's,
Got it. Yep.
other questions?
I just have a question about the existing ferry pin, the old existing ferry pin that is now Towns. And if that collapsed, would that change the inner, because it would be coming up that side of the harbor with more force if we didn't have that barricade there? How would that impact this parking lot?
That's a good question. The model that we built for this particular task doesn't go that far out, so I don't. I only know kind of based on what the existing condition is. That would need to be really probably another analysis to see what, and maybe as part of the crib work analysis to see what sort of protection they're providing and how different it would be in their absence. But I can't answer that based on this work.
I just like to keep it in people's mind that would cause a lot more problems downtown if we don't do something